that Christianity does. And again, that's not true. There are quite a few misconceptions like this, and that's understandable because we're a different civilization and stuff like that. But you'll get the answers again and again in the Quran. Because the thing about the Quran is, it's there to be accessible for everybody. It's not a scripture which is, you need a PhD, you need someone sitting with you.
I thought it was only written in Arabic because I have friends who are from other Muslim countries, for example Bangladeshi, and they have learned Arabic to read the Quran. Was that just so they could read it in the original?
Yeah, that's the original, that's the translation. So translations will always be a shadow of what the message, right? But that makes no difference in terms of you getting the gist of the message. That's going to be the main thing. But I'd like to, what's it called? Do you have an email address?
Yeah, I do.
I can email you some other resources, and we can be in contact. If you have any.
I can't guarantee a lot. I'm quite a busy person. I will definitely try and read this. I'm very interested in Islam.
Definitely.
But I can't guarantee a lot of education.
No. That's absolutely that's absolutely fine. There's actually an email address. If you have questions, you will find an email address on the inside page as well. It's I think somewhere. It's somewhere in here.
Whose email address is this?
It will go to the organization I work for.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you got any questions on Islam...
Did your organization translate this?
We didn't translate this, but somebody that worked for us, he previously translated it. This is one of the latest translations. It's quite easy to read and stuff.
Yeah. It's a direct translation. There's no interpretation put into it.
No, there's no interpretation, but it's like...
Everyone's a little bit...
No, not quite. It's kind of like this. Say in English, you have camel, the word camel. In Arabic, you'll have, I think, over 200 words for camel or something, right? So, it's not exact, something like this. But the message is the same. It's a very neutral translation.
So does that mean that you're saying it's much more parabolic, it's about stories rather than individual segments and lines? If the individual words as such don't matter quite as much, does that mean it's more of the story, the Quran's got more of a message rather than having individual commandments?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Quran has, you're exactly right, parables, stories, history, a lot of focus on theology, praise of God. So it's not like, Islam is not like, when you open up the Quran, it's not about do and don't. I mean, you do have a small part, segments of that, what's allowed and what's not allowed. But the Quran is there to change your heart. That's the main thing. The Quran mentions the heart a lot. And the thing about submitting to God is that it will give you peace of heart. That's the main thing.
Science, though, I mean, is that a literal heart, or is that kind of much more metaphorical? Because we know that emotions don't actually come from the heart; they do come in the brain. It's just the heart's quite, it does feel like it comes from the heart.
Yeah.
So that's a more metaphorical way of putting it. It's not.
They have discovered these neurons in the heart.
That's just to make the heart beat.
There is that, but there is also the concept of the thinking heart. For me, that's kind of irrelevant because it could be that, like you said, it's a metaphor. It could be that, no, the heart physically thinks. I don't know the answer. But the message is the same, whether we say reflect upon this or not.
It's only a very small take.
Yeah. But the thing about the Quran is that it is something which it gets people to really change their perspective on life. I would recommend you start with chapter 18. That's about young people. Yeah, it's actually a story that we also get before Islam, because you remember Islam is a continuation of the prophets of the old. Yes.
And what about? So I spoke. What about reading the Quran in historical context? So, for example, I was speaking to a friend of mine, a friend I made recently at Imperial. He's Islamic, and he said he believed in the death penalty. I can't quite remember our conversation, but I was asking him.
That's the libertarian.
And it's the same to me. It's the same with homosexuality. Do you have to read the Quran to an extent in historical contexts? Because I'm not saying it's completely different, but I'm saying small things like, so Muhammad, he was in Medina. So in Medina he was running a state. He was born in Mecca and he ran the state Medina. He's running a tight ship. He needs to make sure that people are kind of in line. So I've heard the story of the Jewish man, and then that led to all Jews being expelled. I mean, in the historical context back then, that's very much justified. But nowadays, with such extreme acts like that, still be justified. Like homosexuality, I've been told, is because you were made, and then it's your responsibility, to make others. And if you're homosexual, you cannot do that. But would you not say, based upon what I've just said, unless that's wrong or I've remembered it wrong, would you not say that in these modern times, where you've got a population approaching 8 billion people on the planet, we don't need everyone to have children? In somewhere like Medina, you definitely did. You needed to keep your population up. But in a world like this, is that still necessary for you to, you have to have children, or you can't be homosexual because of that?
There's a few things you said there, like about you have a duty to have take care of other human beings and reading the Quran historically. The thing is, we as Muslims believe that this is revelation from God. So the lessons and the objectives are timeless. So from that perspective, reading it historically wouldn't make sense. But there is one sense in which reading it historically in some areas, like politics, is important. So for example, that story you mentioned about the Jewish people, back then everything was based on tribes and allegiances and contracts. So there was a contract made, there was a breach, and then it was I don't remember which incident you're referring to, because there's quite a few, but this was pretty much the norm of international relations. So anybody that studies, say, political science today, we have states and we have nation states today, and then we have the United Nations, we have international organizations, human rights organizations and whatnot. So you have a functioning international system. In the past, we had what Hobbes would refer to as a state of anarchy. You would have states, no demarcated borders, and you would have whoever has the power, they can invade the foreign state and do these types of things. So the political aspect, we have to look at it from that perspective.
Muhammad expanded the religion, and his successors expanded the religion through conquest, and obviously that wouldn't be appropriate nowadays. And there are other means in which you can spread the message.
And there's also another context to keep in mind. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, do not fight the Ethiopians unless they fight you first. Do not fight the Turks unless they fight you first. So what's interesting is Ethiopians were not hostile. The Romans and the Persians were hostile. So there's a context. It wasn't just like all-out war against everybody. And like you said about it wouldn't be acceptable today. So today we have two main sort of schools in international relations. We have liberalism and we have realism, right? But even realists today, they would hold on to this idea that if there is threat to your state, then they can have offensive realism and invade and do these things, or defensive realism and defend themselves. So sometimes there's unfair criticism towards the political aspects of Islam in the beginning, because people are taking, but they never had this. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah.
But you are saying that obviously the messages don't change in historical context. Don't kill doesn't matter if it's now or 1,000 years ago. But some things in terms of historical events, you say the historical context very much.
Yeah. So for example, if you have a Muslim country, you have a non-Muslim states like you have today, you don't do the sort of expansion that we're speaking about, because you have international treaties, you have borders, you have alliances, you have all of these types of things. In the past, those things didn't exist. However, you mentioned homosexuality. So homosexuality, you mentioned about population and stuff, like today we have lots of population and back then we didn't. Thing is, that's not the reason why it's forbidden. It's forbidden because God said it's forbidden. So even if someone technically is a homosexual and they also have 10 children because they're bisexual, that in a way solves the problem you're speaking about, but Islam will still forbid it. Likewise, pig in Islam is not allowed.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, but why is it not allowed? God said so. You see, so there's certain things.
God.
Yeah, trusting God. So there's certain things. Like I said, I can show you, Ray, why Islam is true, but why Islam has X, Y, Z, we don't know. We simply have to say God.
The thing is, for me, reading the Quran, I still won't read it necessarily believing that there is a God who can perform such miracles.
Right.
That part is kind of beyond my belief. But regardless of that, I think that there's a lot that I can learn.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the Quran and other books were made by, millennia of thought. You hear me out. It's not directly, but in my opinion, the Quran is made. It's a truth in how people can work, and how people
Like
can
a
work.
pragmatic thing.
Personally, exactly. I think, in my belief, it's less about true, submission to a real God, but more pragmatic. This is the best way to live.
I see that, and I think most people think that about religion. I would obviously not believe that. At the same time, in Islam, when it comes to evidence and proof, Islam doesn't shy from it. So, as Muslims, for example, I wouldn't say to somebody, believe and that's it. I would actually try to reason and try to give rational arguments. So, one of the things about the Quran is the Quran helped science flourish. Why? Because the Quran itself as a book is a book of critical reasoning. It gets you to think. It gets you to reflect. The Quran teaches you not to accept the norms of your society, right? To actually think about what you're doing.
And the religious tolerance of the early Islamic states as well. Baghdad being that centre of learning.
Yeah?
What about, last question.
Sure.
What about the state of, the Arab world right now? And there are some, very suppressing laws, which, very much suppress homosexuals, very much suppress women, and many other groups. Would you say that they are in direct affront to the Quran?
Well, the thing is, I don't want to talk about those states because those are post-colonial states.
Oh yeah.
Which are, what I would say is that, say for example,
It's definitely not without its historical
yeah,
context.
well, let's put it this way. Say there is a state that we can look back at in history. You, Ray, could look at the laws of that state which are being applied according to the Quran, not somebody else. And they are, according to you, oppressive. Because you will say, for example, that hijab is a choice.
Not so much hijab, more kind of, homosexuality being illegal.
Yeah, okay.
Until recently, women not being able to drive.
Yeah. So the woman not driving, that's not to do with Islam. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's just
no.
whatever it is. Yeah. But for example, hijab being enforced, homosexuality not being allowed. What else?
I don't know. There's
Okay. So for example, in Islam, objectification of women is criminalized.
Yeah.
So you can't have a woman who says, I want to make income on, selling pictures of myself or wearing revealing clothes. Islam will say, no, you're not allowed to do that. Now, someone who's brought up in an egalitarian society, they'll say that's oppressive. Or about homosexuals, say two homosexuals holding hands in public or
would it not be their right to get it wrong, and then for God to judge them, at the end, rather than the state to come in and say so?
Yes, so that's
Can you not give people the opportunity to get things right for the sake of freedom? Obviously,